And my sincere wish to the presenters, please stick to your time frames, because we have a lot of presentations. We still need to have time for questions. And that's why I'm inviting now Gottfried Konecny, Professor Emeritus from Leibniz University of Hannover, Germany, our old-time friend of the company Rockers.
Friend of our company and constant visitor of our conferences.
Thank you very much, Victor. Thank you very much, Victor. This is the wrong presentation. The first is the mapping from space. Right? Yeah. Okay, here we are. Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, Victor. It is a great pleasure to be here for the 7th time at the Rakurs conference.
Oh, already sounds.
And I have learned a great deal being at these conferences, and I would like to congratulate the company Rakurs. You have not only represented your company, but you have done a great service to the Russian photogrammetric development, bringing it close to what the world really is doing with photogrammetry. I know I'm a photogrammetrist, and mapping is not possible without imagery. And this was so in the early beginnings. I spent quite a number of years in North America, and I have learned over there without imagery there is no mapping. And this was in contrast to what we have done with the theodolite in Germany at one particular time, but we also know that we need imagery. So thank you for this service. Now, we have learned that in the past, mapping will be presented in Prague at the ISPRS Congress. ISPRS has always dealt with mapping, and so why not ask where is the status of mapping in the world? ISPRS has, with UNGGIM, the new organization right now, made a sort of a union, and we simply said, let us find out what the status of mapping in the world is. Oh, here, okay, fine. So this is a joint work that we have started with the UNGGIM. This is part of the United Nations Secretariat, and I'll give you a short report about this. You probably recall that ISPRS has done some previous studies in the years in the 1960s to find out what the status of the world is. And this was done with the member nations on official cartography. And there has been a lot of work that was done by Brandenburg at Laval University, and there were resolutions. And the latest resolution in 2009 simply said, right now, well, let's revive that. And we said within ISPRS, we must try to find out what it is. So what was Brandenberger's findings? He went the various scales. You could very easily see that the scale 1 to 250,000, 1 to 500,000 is not a problem. Everybody knows an atlas. And sometimes the atlas is wrong, but nevertheless, we know where our towns are. But the problems are in the larger scales. For example, in the scales 1 to 50,000, 1 to 25,000. And this is where the local management of sustainable resources is taking place. So the basic finding of Brandenburg at that time was that in 1 to 25,000 the world was covered perhaps at this to 1/3. And at 1 to 50,000 it was covered to 2/3. And 1 to 250,000 it was nearly complete. So, but the other discussion was that when we found out the update rates of the various countries, we could simply say that the average world map, 1 to 25,000, was perhaps 20 years. You know that in your countries it is not very much better. In some countries maybe 10 years, but it's old information. And when we go in the world and look at the 50,000 map, 2/3 of the world that was covered at that time, it was 45 years old as a world average. So we are looking, and this has not changed. So we wanted to find out right now, what is it now? So we went with the United Nations, because this is official cartography, and we have 193 United Nations members, and we designed a questionnaire to design the infrastructure of these countries also. And these 27 questions were analyzed, and we have presented these results at Qatar. We even, at the last GGM meeting in Cambridge, we published the data. And so these were the countries where we got answers. You can simply see about 90 countries. In the meantime, during the last months, 4 more countries have come in. So you can simply say the magic number of 100 countries has not been achieved. Where did we get all the answers from? Well, we got it from Europe. Europe, with the exception of the Russian Federation, for example. But nevertheless, within Europe we are mostly complete. Then, on the other hand, in the Americas, it's not so bad either. Right now, with the exception of some countries like Argentina, right now that have some very special problems with the Malvinas or Falkland Islands and things like that. But the big problem is somewhere in between in Asia. And we have been trying through the United Nations to find out what is the status in these countries. So, obviously, the areas in Asia are conflict regions, and it is very difficult to get information. I'm going to show you that if you need map information, this is not necessarily the case. You can buy it through some vendors. In Africa, it's a little bit mixed, but this is what the situation is. So we are trying right now. And the new resolution has been passed in New York to encourage countries to give out this information. We don't want the maps, but we just want the status of what mapping has been done. Now, ISPRS didn't help. What you can see, those are the ISPRS members in red that have not helped us. Maybe they could not to get the information. You can see countries like Russian Federation, like Saudi Arabia, like India, and various Argentina right now. There are some rules, perhaps. But on the other hand, you can go to a very famous company which is called Eastview. And if you really want maps of Northern Korea, like you see here, you just order it and you can get it at the scale of 1 to 50,000. So there are channels where unofficial mapping is really possible. And there is another company in Germany where you can do that. So when we went to the map questionnaire, what is the map coverage right now? You can see from our members we have obtained in green the answers, and in blue and in yellow we have not. And on the other hand, we went right now to nationally produced maps that can be from the owners, from the states, that can be sold in North America. And you can see that all those right now at various scales you have the possibility. While it's illegal in India to possess a map 1 to 50,000, you can buy it in the United States and take it to India if you want. And if you don't want, there are 2 major forces in the past, the US military, that has produced maps at these scales. And you can also buy them through Minneapolis, through Eastview. And there is a huge capability of to use Russian-produced military maps that were produced until the year 1990 at that particular time, even Antarctica. And so when we take it all together, maps combined, official and unofficial. This is a picture. We can pretty well say that the map of the world at 1 to 50,000, it exists. It has been done. It's done by various sources. It's not official mapping. And the problem is, like it was before, it's the age of the maps. When you go to Greenland, parts of Africa, it's over 40 years old. When you go to the yellow territories, from what we can get from Eastview, right now it's maybe 30 years old. And the countries in green, those are the ones where he has up-to-date information. We know today, so mapping is not the problem. We have imagery, and it's just the way to do it. The other questions that we have analyzed is, what is the distribution of the maps? Who distributes by web? You can see the green ones do by the internet. Then the question is, are the map availability? Okay, in that case, they're free of charge. That's the American system where you can get the maps free of charge right now, just at cost. And here it's being charged. So it's a commercial aspect of selling maps. And of course, the map restrictions in all the red countries that have answered, you cannot, they will give you the information that maps are available, but you cannot buy the maps. Okay, and, you can see again the West and so forth, it's free. Okay, how is the mapping done? Is it done directly by the agency, or is it done by outsourcing? Simply private companies. They go to the private sector, as you can see. In North America, for example, mostly, and also Australia, you go to private companies to do it. And in some countries like China and so forth, it's done in-house. And who uses satellite imagery? As you can see, almost everybody uses satellite imagery. Only some countries that want to use aerial imagery in addition. And who uses LIDAR and radar? Almost everybody who has the technical capabilities. Orthophotos. Everybody uses orthophotos. So if the maps are out of date, orthophoto is a beautiful possibility in order to update your maps as a map substitute. Then existence of the digital elevation model. So this is our status. We have come very far. Everybody is using digital elevation models. Who is using or wanting to use 3D products? Everybody in science says 3D is the situation. But the huge administrations say, no, that's too much. For us, it's enough to do 2 dimensions. So it's interesting, perhaps. Another big issue is what is about the cadastre. And you can see the national cadastral coverage right now is lacking totally in the Americas. They don't know who has rights to property, who owns it, or whatever the rights are. In Europe, Asia, and so forth, these things are clarified. And maybe the reason is because some of the cadastral agencies, the mapping agencies, have no responsibility for the cadastre. Now, there are some comparisons right now. Of course, these slides will be distributed so you can analyze it. For example, property cadastre, Europe versus Americas. Just every country relies on governmental funding of mapping. It's not private. And these are the server distribution of the mapping products. So what can we do? We can hope that all the countries of the world are going to contribute, and we are looking particularly to the big industrial efforts. We know that right now, when you go, for example, to Russian Federation, thanks to Scanex, we have gotten information that right now Scanex is interesting for Rosreester, for example, to obtain a coverage of the entire territory at half meter or 1 meter resolution. And that's the way to go. This is the existence which was a few years ago, 2011, 2012. We have also in the West, of course, the big private companies like Google, and they have projects like Google Maps, Google Street Map, ground truth. Google Street Map is not everywhere in the world is it available, because some people they reject it. They simply say, okay, look, going into private territories. But on the other hand, they do it anyway, because they do it for updating their mapping. And they have a project which they call Ground Truth. And Ground Truth is a very interesting situation. And they want to take outdated maps, which the government cannot maintain very quickly. And as far as that's concerned, they will use Emeritus to do that. And I was very impressed that you have Yandex in Russia. They're doing the same thing, and we perhaps discuss it. There is another big company. It's Microsoft Bing Maps. And they're not doing it with satellites, which with satellite imagery you can do it for the entire world, but they do it for North America and they do it for Europe, where all the big cities are flown with the Ultra Map, for example, at 15 centimeter, and they're doing the updating with aerial imagery. We should also not forget that there is a big effort going on by the companies that make navigational systems, like Navtec. And if you go through their background, for example, if you go through China, Navtec has data, road data, for 93% of the territory of China, of all the roads that you have there. And it goes, you would expect that in Europe, but nevertheless, even in Brazil, you have 90% of the roads, and you have that in India, and you have that, and of course they have some very special sort of mapping with this that you have there, and TomTom is another one of those companies. So, and the question, we should not forget the crowdsourcing situation, emergency situation. So there's a lot of things going. And the question is, it's done in competition, private against the government. I think the best would be if they all got together and like it's being done. Maybe Yandex can show together with Rosary as to the way to come. So, UNGGIM needs the information. The member countries can help. ISPRS, we will continue within the working group to do it. And we hope to make it sustainable despite some of the obstacles. We will have a meeting on that in Moscow at the Scanex conference, which we will discuss, and there will be another symposium next year. Thank you very much.
Спасибо, Gottfried. Коллеги, вопрос.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Are there any questions? It's not a question, it's a request. Please use the microphone and speak closer to the microphone, because in this part of the room I cannot quite hear what is being spoken, okay? So, any questions? Maybe I will ask one question. Gottfried, you talked about quantitative characteristics of map coverage in the world. Have you done any comparisons for quality? I mean, the completeness of data depending on countries, from country to country.
There are some standards, of course, that need to be observed, and the standards are within the national system. There is no international standard on that.
Okay. Спасибо.
Thank you.